The light from the chandelier shone brightly on the single sheet of paper placed before me. What emerged from the jewelry box wasn't a ring. It was a one-way plane ticket, departing in 48 hours. My father said nothing as he placed a check beside it. My mother smiled and said, "It's a new life." My sister quietly filmed the scene from her seat a little distance away. I finally understood. This wasn't encouragement. This was an eviction. No one raised their voice. No one blamed me. They were simply, and politely, removing my chair from the family circle. Even so, I lifted my spoon, as if nothing had happened. I broke the surface of my dessert. The thin film of sugar cracked silently. Is leaving silently just running away? Confronted with the choice to leave home for the sake of my independence, was I wrong to just accept it? Should I have fought to stay? The location of the most expensive family meeting. That restaurant was the venue for the most expensive family meeting of my life. The Sterling Family Country Club sat atop a hill on the outskirts of San Francisco. The chandeliers hanging from the ceiling remained fully lit even during the day. They always staged the continuation of a special night. The carpets on the floor showed no wear, no matter how many years they were trodden upon. The servers moved without a single wasted motion. I grew up in a residential area well known even within the Bay Area. I stopped just once at the entrance. I adjusted the hem of my skirt and brushed the dust off my shoulder. My gray sweater was the same one I wore last week. The reflection in the mirror showed a face that knew it didn't belong here. I was guided to the family table in the back. It was by the window, surrounded by walls on 3 sides. A layout with no escape. It felt like an oral defense for a doctoral thesis. Father in front, mother to the right, sister to the left. In this house, a seat was never something you chose. It was something you were granted. I used to believe that staying in your assigned spot was the only way to belong. My father checked his wristwatch 3 times before I even sat down. A Rolex. The ticking of the second hand sounded unusually loud. My mother adjusted the position of her pearl necklace. "I'm glad you came," she said. Her voice was subtly different depending on whether she was praising, lecturing, or getting what she wanted. Today, it was the third voice. My sister, Victoria, placed her smartphone on the edge of the table the moment she sat down. She adjusted the lens angle once. She checked how the light hit the frame. It was a motion practiced in law school mock trials, finding the position where things look best. Eleanor. Mother called my name. She always called it exactly once before getting to the point. That was our family signal. "You look lovely." I was wearing the same sweater as last week. She hadn't noticed it last week. She didn't notice it today either. Based on the seating arrangement alone, I already understood half the weight of what was about to happen. At this table, coincidences do not occur. Topics that haven't been pre-decided are never brought up. Dessert was served just as the meal was winding down. Until then, no one touched upon the core issue, the role of the second daughter. I was born the second daughter of the Sterling family, 3 years younger than my sister, Victoria. Father was an investment banking executive. Mother was a director of a charity organization well known in social circles. In our house, titles were introduced before family composition. Father was always a correct person, the correct schools, the correct career path, the correct marriage, the correct friends. Correctness was his job. Mother was a person who staged the correct family. What face to wear in front of whom, which topics to raise, which to avoid. To her, family was less about emotion and closer to a work of art. My sister was the completed masterpiece. From a young age, piano, speech, mock trials. She always stood on stages that were easy to evaluate. Certificates and letters of recommendation filled the walls of our house. I was in places that were harder to evaluate. The science lab, the library, experimental notebooks, and disassembled devices. I won awards. My grades weren't bad, but in our house, the only value lay in success that is easy to explain to others. My sister's acceptance letters were framed. My research presentation was mentioned once at the dinner table and then forgotten. Father often said, "Eleanor is a patient child." That was a compliment, at least, inside his head. Because I was patient, my sister's recital took priority. Because I was patient, my schedule could be pushed back. Because I was patient, I could change my career path for the family. I had played that role for a long time. The daughter who caused no problems. The daughter who made no demands. The daughter who voiced no expectations. Before I knew it, how the family looked had become heavier to me than my own self. That is why I didn't find it strange to be sitting in this seat. I felt like I had known for a long time that something would happen here today. I didn't just understand it. I was remembering it. In this house, the answers are always decided beforehand. I just have to adjust my seat to fit them. The box hadn't been open yet, but I felt they had already decided what I would say the moment it was opened. Mother's smile was a face prepared for tears. Father's posture was that of someone about to give a lecture. My sister's eyes were the eyes of someone who knew. This is the best scene. No one raised their voice. No one insulted me. The procedure to remove only me from the family circle proceeded with extreme politeness. I picked up the check. The paper was thick. It was the kind my father used for important transactions. Thank you. My voice was surprisingly steady. I will use it carefully. Father's shoulders dropped, just a fraction. Mother's smile became closer to genuine. The problem was solved. I think that's what they thought. I folded the check once and put it in my bag. My sister's camera didn't miss that movement. No one knew. No one knew that 2 days ago, $8.5 million had landed in my account. No one knew. This check was not my first taste of freedom. I still said nothing. That was my choice. The history of subtle exclusion. Phase 2. The path to independence. I had known for a long time that the intervention that night wasn't a sudden event. Families don't kick people out overnight. They take their time. They quietly stack up the atmosphere that says, "You don't belong here." Little by little. I first became conscious of it when I was 8 years old. My sister's piano recital and my science contest district finals fell on the same day. I made a simple water purification device, using only household materials. I built a mechanism to turn muddy water clear. My homeroom teacher, Ms. Henderson, said, "This is the most complete project I've seen in 20 years of teaching." I believed those words. In the car, my father said to me, "Eleanor is a patient child, isn't she?" That day, my trophy remained on the kitchen counter. No one moved it. We went to my sister's recital. I watched from the audience as she bathed in applause under the spotlight. That was the first time. After that, the same pattern repeated itself over and over. I withdrew from the debate club tournament because it clashed with my sister's mock trial. I turned down a regional research presentation because I was told we had a family dinner. When deciding on a college, Father said clearly, "There is your sister's tuition to consider. You need to make a realistic choice." I made the realistic choice. Always. When I chose environmental engineering at university, Father frowned just a little. "That's close to a hobby." Mother was more direct. "Are there proper jobs in a field like that?" My sister's law school acceptance letter was framed and hung on the dining room wall. My research results received a single, "That's amazing," before the topic changed. In family conversations, my life was always a footnote. Still, I didn't think I was unhappy. At least, not for a long time. When I started my research at Stanford, I stood for the first time in a place where I was evaluated solely on results. The professors didn't know my family pedigree. They didn't know my sister's career. They didn't know my father's title. All they looked at was the data, the experimental results, and the precision of the thesis. It was only then that I learned such a quiet and fair place existed. And it was there that I experienced my first major failure. A farm outside Fresno. An irrigation system in testing. A single line of error in my algorithm. 30% of the crops were submerged. The farmers' voices were closer to exhaustion than anger. "Let's stop." After hanging up the phone, I sat on the floor of the lab. That night, there was a voicemail from Father. "Isn't it time you looked at reality?" From Mother, a message. "You don't have to push yourself." From my sister, a laughing, crying emoji and one sentence. "Is it true the vegetables drowned?" I didn't reply to anyone. Instead, I reread the failure log from the very first line. Where, what, and how had I gone wrong? What did I need to fix to ensure the same failure never happened again? For 3 weeks, I barely went home. I slept at my desk. I threw away cold coffee. I rewrote the code and read it again. I found the error at 2:30 a.m. on a Wednesday. A variable initialization error. Tiny. Easy to overlook. A fatal single line. I rewrote everything from there. The improved system was 40% more efficient than before. And, by chance, I had incorporated a mechanism that self-detected and corrected errors. I sent that data to my professor. The reply was short. "Tomorrow at 9. Bring everything." That was the first turning point in my life. Still, I said nothing to my family. Even if I talked about success, I knew somewhere deep down it would just be washed away by my sister's next topic. So, when the intervention began that night, I wasn't surprised. My family only knew the story of my failure. They didn't know a single thing about my recovery. And now, I know clearly that this was no accident. It was simply more convenient for them not to know. Success and silence. Success didn't arrive in the form I had imagined. There was no thunderous applause, no celebratory party, no moment where someone patted me on the back. There was only a short email from the professor and one phrase: be ready. The morning after I sent the recovery data, Professor Collins called me into his office. Give me 7 minutes. Show me without saying a word. I showed him 3 months of logs, the corrected algorithm, and the blueprint for preventing recurrence. I explained them in order. The professor didn't interrupt once. When the 7 minutes were up, he finally looked up and said, "This isn't a class assignment anymore." That afternoon, he told me, "I'm preparing a presentation slot for you at next month's Agritech Summit." That was the first time in my life I was given permission to stand on an official stage. For the weeks leading up to the presentation, I met with the professor many times. How much to reveal? What to hide? Which failures to disclose honestly? Professor Collins said clearly, "Don't talk about success. Talk about what you learned from failure." I did exactly that. On the day of the summit, a group of 4 in suits sat in the 3rd row. In the waiting room, the professor told only me, "That's the AgriCorp technical team." Even hearing that, I didn't hold any special expectations. I started my story with a failure, just as I always did, losing 30% of the crops, the single line of error, the voices of the farmers, and then how I fixed it, why I built a system that wouldn't repeat the same mistake. During the Q&A, that technical team asked the most questions. After the presentation ended, the professor said to me privately, "The complicated talk starts now." A few days later, a request for a formal meeting arrived. 2 hours of technical review with 4 engineers. The professor sat in for only the first 30 minutes, then left the room. "This is your job now." In that moment, I understood clearly. From here on, this wasn't an extension of my research. It wasn't a negotiation to report to someone, nor an interview for guidance. It was a job I was taking on under my own name. From then on, I stopped telling anyone about my progress. I kept quiet because I didn't want to share a story. I wanted to share a conclusion. The night the draft contract arrived, I consulted the professor once. Should I accept this? He looked at the conditions, not the numbers. If you can continue your research, it's worth accepting. The formal contract arrived a week later. Acquisition price, job description, location, Director of the Sustainable Development Division. Seeing that title pulled me back to reality a little. I was still a researcher enrolled in graduate school, not a business executive. That's why the condition, welcomed as a technical lead, was acceptable to me. I signed it and saved the PDF. Up to this point, Professor Collins and David knew. What I didn't tell anyone was what came next. The transfer date, the exact amount, the account number. I didn't share that with anyone. The transfer was completed 2 days before the intervention dinner. The notification from the bank was surprisingly bureaucratic. Deposit confirmed. That was it. I looked at the screen and couldn't move for a while. Before joy, a strange silence arrived. Who should I tell about this fact? I thought about it naturally. I would tell the professor eventually. I would tell him when it became necessary. But my family's faces were the only ones that didn't appear in my mind until the very end. And around that time, my family was preparing for something else. Messages from mother increased. Questions from father increased. Calls from my sister increased. I answered only this: research is going well. Future is undecided. Under consideration. I didn't tell anyone. It's already over. The night before the intervention dinner, I opened my banking app and checked the balance one more time. $8.5 million. It hadn't moved. It hadn't disappeared. Looking at those numbers, for the first time, I felt a tiny bit of relief. No matter what they said to me tomorrow, I could choose my own life one more time. That's what I thought. And that was enough. The intervention dinner. Until dessert was served, no one touched the main subject. That was the Sterling family way. First, place small talk. Next, place the weather. Next, place talk of my sister's work. Warm up the atmosphere sufficiently. Then cut to the important talk. Cream brulee was ordered as mother's favorite. Truthfully, I had disliked the texture since childhood, but mother had never once remembered that. I tapped the surface of the sugar with my spoon. The sound of the thin film cracking sounded oddly loud. Father cleared his throat. Before he does that, he always has a habit of adjusting his cufflinks. Eleanor. My name is always used exactly once before the speech. Your mother and I have thought about you a lot. Mother had already picked up her napkin. It was a gesture prepared for tears. Do you really think you are happy with your current life? I didn't answer immediately. There is no correct answer prepared for this question, no matter what answer I returned. The next line was already decided. Young people have a hard time realizing their own unhappiness, Mother said. You are working very hard. But isn't the direction a little off? Father continued quietly. In research, only a tiny fraction of people succeed. Isn't it time you looked at reality? My sister, Victoria, said nothing. She slightly adjusted the position of her smartphone on the edge of the table. I watched that movement. The lens was facing directly at me. Mother took out a velvet-covered box. She placed it between the salt and pepper, aligning the angle perfectly. The movement was that of someone who had practiced many times. It's a new start. I looked at the box, the size of a jewelry box. In our house, boxes given to me were always a set with relocation. I knew what was inside before I opened it. Inside was a one-way plane ticket, departing in 48 hours. Destination: Austin. Father placed a check next to it. $5,000. Seed money? Father said, think of it as your initial living expenses. Find a proper job over there. Mother made her voice tremble just a little. You can surely start over. My sister's smartphone tilted slightly, an angle to capture my face in the center of the screen. I simply watched this sequence of movements. No one was shouting. No one was blaming me. No one said, get out. They were just politely explaining that there was no place for me at this table. Father said in his usual voice, this is for your own good. Mother said with tears in her eyes, it is because we are family that we make tough decisions. My sister finally smiled. It was a smile of victory. I remained silent for a while. This silence was part of their scheduled harmony. Here, I would cry, get angry, refuse, and then the conversation would end with, I'm glad you understand. That was how it was supposed to go. I picked up the check. The paper was thick. It was the kind my father used for important transactions. Thank you. My voice was surprisingly steady. I will use it carefully. Father's shoulders dropped, just a fraction. Mother's smile became closer to genuine. The problem was solved. I think that's what they thought. I folded the check once and put it in my bag. At that moment, my sister's smartphone surely captured the action. I left the dessert almost untouched. Father took a sip of wine and moved to wrap up the conversation. You will understand someday too. I nodded, and I said nothing. They didn't know a single thing. They didn't know that 2 days ago, $8.5 million had landed in my account. That the $5,000 they placed there didn't amount to even a fraction of a percent of that sum. They genuinely believed I was still in the middle of a failure. The departure, the dinner ended, and Father said to me, I'll walk you to the car. It was a suggestion close to an order. When we got outside, the parking lot was filled with luxury cars. Father's black Mercedes was parked in the brightest spot. Father stood in front of me and said in a slightly softer voice, this really is for your own good. I looked him in the eye and said, I know. That wasn't a lie. He truly believes it. In his mind, tonight's act is the work of a correct father. Austin is a good city, Father added, to start a new life. I nodded one more time. I suppose so. I said nothing more. Before getting into the car, Father said one last thing. Someday, a day will come when you thank me. I answered quietly. I already do. He couldn't understand the meaning of that until the very end. Around that time, inside the restaurant, my sister had already finished her post. A night of big decisions for the family. My sister chose independence. We support her new life. Text like that, accompanied by the video of me accepting the check. My smartphone started vibrating. The family group chat. Messages from relatives. Comments from acquaintances. Good for you. A new beginning. Shall I introduce you to a job? I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, another notification arrived. From the professor. Did it finish safely? I replied shortly. Yes. Next. From an unknown number. Sending candidates for Chicago housing. Agricorp HR department. Next. From Marcus. Preparing the welcome party. 2 streams of my life were moving simultaneously. One was the story my family created. The other was the reality I chose. I stood in the parking lot and looked down at my smartphone. I realized for the first time that two lives could move in such different directions on the same night. I told my family nothing. If I spoke, this night would become a night of winning and losing. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to leave here. I got into my car and closed the door. I kept my hands on the steering wheel and didn't move for a while. Eventually, I slowly pressed the accelerator, and the lights of the restaurant quietly receded deep into the windshield. And I thought clearly of just one thing. I am no longer a character in this story. From here on, it is my turn to be the one who chooses the choice to move. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights immediately. I turned the lock twice and aligned my shoes. Standard procedure, but my hands were slow. I took the check and the plane ticket out of my bag and laid them on the desk. Thin paper, but it held only weight. Father's handwriting showed a pressure that knew no hesitation. The notifications didn't stop. Good for you. A new beginning. I felt those words whittling away my options. I turned my smartphone face down. Explaining is similar to asking for permission. I didn't want permission. I wanted to leave a record. I sat in my chair and stared at the paper. If I get angry here, the family records rebellion. If I cry here, they record immaturity. If I stay silent, they record agreement. My sister's lens always desires one of those three. I found myself thinking about which category my face fell into right now. That habit hadn't left me yet. I moved the ticket and the check, creases and all, into a different envelope. I wouldn't cash it. I wouldn't send it back. What I needed to do wasn't a tug of war over who was right. It was the design of distance. I told myself that. The next morning, on the way to the lab, I kept asking myself, am I cold? Is it cowardly to silently accept what my family offered out of good intentions, and then silently slip away? Or am I just finally using the survival skills I learned in that house for my own sake? The professor's voice suddenly floated into my mind. If you can continue your research, that condition was already met. The problem was my heart. Was I still a person who couldn't move forward without my family's permission? I wanted to prove that wasn't true. Yet the person I was trying to prove it to was still my family. That afternoon, I opened the airline app. Destination: Austin. Even the seat number was confirmed. I closed the screen and searched for flights to Chicago. My breath stopped once in front of the purchase button. Should I have stayed and fought? But refusing to get involved is also a choice. I purchased the ticket to Chicago and saved the confirmation email. In that moment, breath flowed through the depths of my chest. Somewhere inside me, a quiet voice answered. Facing something and getting entangled in it are different. I want to choose the side of not getting entangled. Am I still running away? Maybe a little. But if I decide for myself where to stop after running, then that isn't an escape. It's a relocation. I went back home and, deep in my drawer, I placed the receipt for Chicago on top of the ticket to Austin. 2 sheets of paper quietly overlapped. I intended to take a little more time until that overlap became my answer. A seat isn't granted. That night, unable to sleep, I watched the shadows on the ceiling. The whiteness created by the chandelier light wasn't here. Yet, only the sensation of that seat returned. The fact that my place in the family circle was temporary. That it was a chair that could be put away if necessary. When I was small, my seat at the dining table was changed often. When guests came, only I was moved to the edge. The reason was it's easier to move. I never doubted it. Today was the same. I am easy to move. Therefore, easy to push out. Is leaving silently just running away? That question wasn't a voice of blame, but a voice of measurement. Whose story am I still in? Have I been able to step into my own story? The next morning, I made sure not to look at my sister's post. If I looked, I would start explaining again. Explaining is similar to asking for permission. I didn't want permission. I wanted to leave a record for myself. I opened my notebook and wrote the date. Then, just one short sentence. A seat isn't granted. It's chosen. I couldn't quite grasp the full meaning yet, but the moment I wrote it, I sat up a little straighter. I closed the page and grabbed my coat. It was cold outside, but the cold doesn't kick me out. If I walk, the road simply continues. On the way to the station, I stopped just once and took a deep breath. The smell of sweet sugar that had lingered in the back of my chest finally faded away. The new reality in Chicago, the ticket to Austin and the check father placed there. I left them in the back of my drawer, neither throwing them away nor returning them. I had already decided then that I would put them in the same drawer in my next room too. I said nothing to father, mother, or Victoria. The following week, I headed to Chicago. I met the professor only once before leaving. Have you decided? Yes. He asked nothing more. On the way to the airport, I thought about my family just once. Even now, they believe I am looking for a job in Texas. I didn't feel like correcting that. On the plane, I opened my banking app and looked at the balance. The amount. The numbers had lost the feel of reality. I wasn't thinking about what I could do with it, but how I would handle it. Life in Chicago was much quieter than I had imagined. The company prepared a welcome party, but I showed my face for a short time and went home early. My work as a director wasn't a series of flashy decisions, but a succession of quiet adjustments. Meetings, design reviews, calls with farmers, failure reports. I gradually understood that I hadn't become a success, but a person responsible. Contact from my family continued for the first few weeks. From mother, "Are you eating properly? Are you cold? Did you find a job?" From father, "How is life over there? Did you open a bank account?" From Victoria, "Is the new city fun?" I returned only simple replies. Busy. Fine. No problems. I added nothing more. The first thing I learned after coming to Chicago was the sound of the city. The screeching of the elevated train in the morning. The sound of the winter wind turning the corner of the building. Sirens ringing in the distance at night. It was a completely different kind of silence from the nights in the Bay Area. The silence here was a silence where no one was watching. I rented a small apartment. Minimal furniture. Just a desk, a bed, and a bookshelf. It took a surprisingly long time to choose curtains. I wasn't used to the feeling of arranging a room that I would show to no one, purely for myself. In the morning, I bought coffee at the same cafe and took the same road to work. No one knows my past. No one knows my family. That fact freed me more than I had expected. Sometimes, I felt the depths of my chest become a little lighter at the fact that I didn't have to explain to anyone where I came from. On my way home from work, when choosing ingredients at the supermarket, I always hesitated a little. The reason for choosing expensive things, or the reason for saving money, I didn't have to explain it to anyone anymore. I could decide based on my mood that day. I learned for the first time just how difficult that was. The meaning of distance. A few months later, I happened to see my sister's post. A family photo. Celebration of father's promotion. Mother's birthday. Only my seat was missing. Strangely, there was almost no sense of discomfort. I looked at the photo while eating dinner alone in my room. There is no reason to go back to this, I thought. One day, a long message arrived from Mother. "I feel a bit of distance lately. Are you hiding something from us?" I reread that sentence many times. Hiding. That is a fact, but I am not taking anything away. I am not hurting anyone. I am simply choosing not to speak. I wrote a short reply. "I'm doing well. Please don't worry." I sent just that and ended the conversation. I kept in touch with the professor occasionally. Talk of research, the thesis, students. He said just once, "Will you not talk to your family anymore?" I thought for a moment before answering. If it becomes necessary, I will. That wasn't an escape, nor a rejection. It was simply the distance I needed right now. As my first year in Chicago was ending, I finished my first project safely. A short email arrived from a farmer. This year, we didn't have the same failure even once. Seeing that sentence, for the first time, I felt glad I chose this job. The check my family prepared for me that night is still tucked away in the back of my drawer. I haven't cashed it. I haven't thrown it away, nor returned it. That was their version of goodwill. I am still in the middle of thinking about how to separate that from my life while leaving it as goodwill. On quiet nights, I sometimes remember those words. This is for your own good. Back then, I didn't understand what that meant. Now, I understand a little. People decide someone else's life within their own sense of righteousness. So I chose another set of words. Is leaving silently just running away? Or is it simply choosing my own life for the first time? I still don't have a clear answer to that. But today, I am doing my own work in a place I decided for myself. That alone is certain. Epilogue. The light in the window. One night, I received a rare phone call from Victoria. Her name was displayed on the screen. I hesitated for a while, then pressed the talk button. "How are you?" My sister said it in her usual voice. "I'm fine. How is Texas?" I searched for words for just a split second. "Busy. I see. It's same as usual here." She asked nothing more, even though she must have had many things she wanted to ask. "Father talks about you often these days." "Is that so?" He wonders if he went too far. I listened to those words in silence. You intend to come back? I couldn't answer that question immediately. Come back. To where? To the family of when? I'm not thinking about it right now. That was the best I could do. After hanging up, I looked out the window for a while. The lights of the buildings were lined up in orderly rows. Lights where I didn't know whose home or whose life they belonged to. I hold my own place within one of them. I thought that was enough. Another day, a short message arrived from Mother. What should we do with the things left in your room? I thought for a while, then replied, leave them as they are. I sent just that and ended the conversation. My childhood photos, that scarf, they are still in that house. On the weekend, I walked alone by the lake. The winter lake in Chicago has almost no color. Gray water, gray sky, gray shore. But within that monotonous scenery, for the first time, I clearly became conscious of myself carrying no one's expectations. Not the successful daughter, not the failed daughter, not the disappointing daughter. Just one human being, working and living. That fact slowly settled inside me. At night, when I returned to my room, I sometimes opened the drawer. That check and the ticket to Austin lay side by side. Both were other roads of my life. Both were roads I did not choose. I gently put them back and closed the drawer. There is no need to deny the roads I didn't choose. I just have to decide not to go back. It took a long time after coming here until I could think that way. And now, I think that is okay. I chose to distance myself from the life my family prepared for me that night. Was that running away? Or was it a choice to protect my own life? If you were in the same position, what would you think of this choice? Please let me know in the comments.